Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Diversity Inclusion event series. I'm your host here, Olla Jongerius. It's fantastic to see so many people here, a lot of people who have attended our events already. So brilliant, welcome, lots of energy, lots of interesting debates. Nice to have you here again. And today we have a very, very special topic, just like all of our events are very special topics. But today going to be something even more interesting, even more specific. And the best part of that is that we don't have one, we don't have two, we have three fantastic speakers with you today, with us today. So really, really exciting, really interested in what is going to be discussed. Please post all your questions in the slide, as you know. But a little bit of introduction for those who have not attended our events before. What is it all about? What are the rules? And so on and so forth. So as mentioned before, my name is Olla Jongerius. I'm a diversity inclusion trainer, a person who's really passionate about the topic of inclusion because of my own life, because of my life experiences, and so on and so forth. But today it's not about myself, but why are those events created and what was the whole purpose of that. So the whole event series was born as a reaction, as a response to the murder of George Floyd, as a way to create a bit of understanding and awareness in the hype of while everybody's talking about diversity. And I'm saying the hype because unfortunately this topic is not addressed enough in today's world. So the first event was the topic of race and white discrimination. It generated lots of ideas, it generated lots of discussions, and it was decided that while there is still interest in that, let's have more events, because diversity inclusion should not be prompted, should not be promoted, should not gain interested when something horrible happens. So let's talk more about that. So we had events like neurodiversity in the workplace. We had events like inclusive language, gender equality, and so on and so forth. So all events are recorded, including this event. You can find all events on our YouTube channel. So we'll send you links all after that. And the rule for this event is that since the event is recorded, we unfortunately disable your chat because of the flashing light that happens during Zoom, as well as you cannot unmute yourself. So it's a listen-only mode. You can ask all your questions in Slido, but in the end, if you really want to ask a personal question to our speakers or to myself, you can do that afterwards once we finish the recording, so you're safe and secure and your privacy is protected. So, brilliant. As a beginning, I would like to ask you, why are you here? What are you doing here? What do you expect? So with this in mind, and I see some of you amazing people already jump into that before I even mention that. So very nice, great proactivity. Please go to slido.com and enter the hashtag inclusive leader, and please share with us what comes to mind when you hear words inclusive leader, just for us to understand where you are at, what do you expect, and what is your perspective on that. And I already see some very interesting answers, as said, skeptical, which is very cool, because as we were just talking with our speakers before that, the best event, the best panel discussions are the ones that not, oh yes, I agree, oh yes, absolutely, oh that's brilliant, but when we have a bit of a spice going on, when we have a bit of disagreement, and we don't expect everyone to agree here, and that's the reason why you want to have a little bit of a discussion, healthy, respectful discussion with everyone. So I see the empathetic as the biggest word here. So it means that a lot of people have mentioned that, as well as psychological safety. Brilliant, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Open-minded, inspiring, equal, continuous learner, dancing, love it. Whatever that means, I would like to hear more about that. Dancing inclusive leader, that's my first. But all views, as long as they're respectful, welcome. Responsibility, awareness. Okay, a couple of more answers. But the biggest one is definitely psychological safety and empathetic. Okay, and the next one, that's we're going to move to the next poll, which is, why are you here? Just for us to understand the reasoning behind you being part of this event. Is it because you want to be an inclusive leader? Is it because you're coaching someone to be an inclusive leader? Or maybe your boss or your colleague lacking skills, or you want someone to help to become an inclusive leader? So it's more about learning. To gain more perspective on inclusive leadership. Okay, that's a good one. I want to see if you're already inclusive enough. Probably not. I can surely do better. Here to learn. That's a very good question, because sometimes you think, you start to doubt yourself. Am I an inclusive leader? Am I not? Where do I start? And do I still have room to improve? Or in which direction do I need to go? To be aware as a recruiter, definitely for recruitment, it's very, very important to mitigate your unconscious biases, your assumptions. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for your answers. Build my knowledge, so it's more about learning as well as to improving yourself. Brilliant. Thank you all very, very much for your answers. It's all been noted. Now, I'm going to present to you our speakers. But for the best way for it to do is for our speakers to present themselves. You read all their biographies so far. So as the first speaker, I would like to welcome Ellie. Ellie, who are you? How are you? And why are you here?
Thank you, Olla. Thank you for the invite. I'm really happy to be here. And my name is Eleonore Soei-Winkels. I am a professor of industrial and occupational psychology in Germany. I've been brought up in Germany. My parents have immigrated from Indonesia because they wanted to have a better life, to build up a better life for themselves and for the kids, and they did. So I was having all the privileges they didn't have in Indonesia as compared to other kids, maybe not as much, but on the other hand, we also have a lot of privileges that I think that other migrant kids don't have when I see them nowadays. So what I have is a mixture of being privileged, but also knowing how it is when you're not. And this is something that I want to help my community to understand, that people can only speak up when they feel they belong to something. So in my little town where I live, I feel included. I belong there. They don't see me as someone who's foreigner or different or whatever. And I think that when you live there, when you live like that, that gives you a psychological safety that we've already seen in Nepal, that make you, speak up, but also make you seize the potential that you have. And I think this is all about to seize the potential that everyone has. And especially during the lockdown, the corona situation, we see that many people will not be able to seize their potential because they're left behind because of several other instances. That's not just racism. That's not that. It's all a diverse thinking, that people who are not digitized enough will be left behind in a digital world. So that's to me.
Thank you so much. It's brilliant to have you here. Really looking forward to learning from you. And Diego.
So hi everyone. So I'm definitely very happy to be here with all of you today. So my background is quite mixed. I've lived most of my life traveling the world with my parents due to their work. Then I completed my studies and so on in Italy. That's where I spent a good 12 to 14 years of my life. And well, I've always been passionate about people, and that's the lines of my profession as well until now. So in terms of inclusiveness, I've always felt a bit like a fish out of water, especially since my move to Italy, because I moved in a small village. I was, I think, the second, blackish looking person in that village. And so I've always been lucky enough to have parents that have told me, there's nothing wrong with you. So I've always lived with the conviction that there was actually nothing wrong with me, and that helped me a lot. But I've always been the fish out of water, dressing up differently, traveling more, speaking a second language, and so on. So definitely a lot of fun times, but also a lot of learnings along the way. And I'm really happy that I've taken all these learnings positively. And so I'm really happy now to basically bring my past into my leadership style, and spread the word, really spread the word as much as possible, and really be an ambassador for making a change in organizations.
I love it, Diego. Especially, it seems like we see a pattern here already. People who felt that they've been excluded, they're the ones to advocate for inclusion because they know how it feels to be excluded. So I can completely resonate with that myself, especially the parts of belonging and where you belong. So looking forward to the discussion. And Irène.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today as well. Thanks for the invitation, Olla, and thanks to the other speakers for joining this, so to say, expert talk. My name is Irène. I moved to Europe, first of all, when I was a little girl, and then we went to Germany. And to be honest, I always felt very lucky because thinking of my mom, who was a single parent, I always imagined it for her to be pretty tough, right? Because she's a well-educated, smart lady, but she didn't have the chance that I had because I came here to Germany when I was a little girl, like 5 years old. I could have my education here, but for her, like she was doing the typical cleaning jobs and so on, right? And I can only hardly imagine how it must feel for someone coming to a country with little children, growing up here, not knowing the language, etc. So looking at my mom, she always gave me the strength, and I decided for myself that I will never see myself as a victim, right? And for my mom, for example, there was never a difference between my brothers and us girls, because she felt like we can do the same things, right? Like cleaning at home, my brothers had to do it as well. And like when we moved to another flat or another house, we as a girl, we also had to carry stuff, heavy stuff and things like that. So for her, it was not a difference. And well, I have a corporate background. I used to work for large corporates like BMW. I worked at Siemens Management Consultancy. Then I was manager of strategy and operations at Deloitte. Nowadays, I'm self-dependent. I'm doing quite a bit of different stuff like organizing events. Then I work a lot with professional education institutions together with marketing agencies. And my topics surround everything that has to do with community building and with a Gen YZX collaboration. So it's also another diversity topic, and I initiated together with a fantastic team an online debate on LinkedIn. Our topic was on diversity, and Ellie was also part of it, which was super great. And well, as you pointed it out at the beginning as well, like every time there's this certain spectacle happening, right? So people approach me because I'm obviously a Black woman, right? So they're much interested to know, like, how does it feel as a Black woman living in a foreign country and so on. But it only happens when an event occurred, right? Like the Black Lives Matters initiatives. And then I know for sure after a couple of weeks and months, it won't be an issue anymore, right? It will be definitely an issue, which is reality, but people will not talk about it anymore. And so I'm just here like to talk from, I would say, a perspective from someone who is affected by, so to say, this kind of event happening. So I'm very happy to be here and share my knowledge with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I completely agree with what you said in terms of when something happens suddenly, like, oh, I have to share my story as well a little bit. I got approached by a lot of people, some recruiters in Berlin and in Germany in general, who approached me saying, oh, do you know any people of color that are looking for a job? And I find it, you know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, it's something needs to happen about that. It shouldn't be just a hype or what's fashionable now. It should be an ongoing conversation. And the events are definitely the first step for people to be in a safe space to learn more about that. You don't know what you don't know, and it's okay not to know, but as long as you're curious to learn more. Brilliant. So the first question I would like to stay with you, Irène. So you mentioned about, being conclusive and being your mother being super open in terms of, being equal. What does it mean for you to be an inclusive leader as an independent woman, a self-employed entrepreneur, as well as a corporate consultant?
Yes, for me, successful leadership is done with the heart and not just with the mind. And it requires qualities like empathy, visionary thinking, and also the courage, and I want to emphasize on this word, courage, to effectively involve people of different backgrounds, right? Since diversity or inclusiveness is so multifaceted, many different personalities needs to be involved, right? Not just the gender issue or cultural issue, but also thinking of people with handicap or people from the LGBTQ scene, right? So those are the things that come to my mind when I think of inclusive leadership. Empathy, visionary thinking, and the courage to take on this challenge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the things also our audience mentioned, which is brilliant, that people are already familiar with the topic. And Ellie, like, what do you think in terms of what are the typical obstacles when somebody wants to genuinely become an inclusive leader? Let's imagine if you're in a corporate environment, what are typical obstacles? Why do people not become inclusive leaders till now? What is the problem?
I don't remember where I read it, but it captures that. So it's for a leader, no matter which background he or she has or it has, it's always easier without flawless, so to speak, flawless to speak with, to surround himself or herself with the people like her or him. Mm-hmm. So it's a natural approach to, like, if the going gets tough, then I would like to have it with nicer people, with where it's going on very well, easily. They have the same, they have the same point of humor, or they have the same values or something like that. But that creates homogeneous teams. And innovation does not occur through having same-minded people. Like Irène already said, that it's not just gender, it's not just all these aspects that she already highlighted, but also, even if we look the same, if you have an Asian woman, the chances are that one is outgoing, the other one is very introverted. So how do you include a person that is not outgoing but still is a thought leader? Just because she is maybe intimidated or maybe put a back from all the sitting, then her or his ideas wouldn't shine, and that makes the team efforts also not as best as possible. So it's the effort is really to give room and to wait until everyone had her say. And also, as we had in our on point debate, someone said that you need to also think of those who are not sitting at the table. Mm-hmm. For example, like during the Corona times that we have now, I saw in LinkedIn so many experts, male experts, saying this and doing this and having I don't know what kind of ideas, crazy ideas, and I didn't see any of my peers, any of my female colleagues, because they were all busy with attending the kids, and all their research just went down. And all the lecturing was like, oh no, I still have some maternal leave, and I still have some, I can take the holidays and everything, and all in that, all my female colleagues vanished. I don't know. And I said, no, I can't do this. I don't want this. I've always been an advocate for diversity and inclusion. And no matter what the crisis is, I have to go through this, because if I don't do this, then my daughter will see that I've just been preaching, but I'm not walking the talk. So I also wanted my students to understand that having kids is possible with having a career. Of course, I'm not corporate at the moment, not like Irène was. I was also a consultant with Accenture. I was also in corporate life. And I'm sure that my privileged position as a professor now allows me to be very flexible with the times. So that's what I'm saying. You have to make room so that everyone can have her say and work towards the strengths that they have.
I completely resonate with that in terms of, especially being a parent. I'm not a parent, at least yet, but I've learned so much during COVID, during the first stage of a pandemic, especially my colleagues, whoever, my business partner I work with, my clients who have kids, their perspective of pandemic is completely different. And I've learned so much how much more difficult it is to be a parent than I've ever imagined. And that opens up your biases, opens up your perspective, and challenges your biases. There is one really good book that I read couple of years ago. I think it's called Quiet. If you're familiar with that, it's exactly about how the world is set up. Our world is set up for extroverts. It's not really set up for introverts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to succeed, you really need to push for that, and that's not fair. It's quite interesting. I can send a link in a follow-up email. But empathetic leader and inclusive leader is the one that opens up the space and includes the introverts and anyone who's not comfortable speaking up as well, and having the space instead of all this loud people speaking all the time. Yeah, very interesting. And Diego, what about you? What do you think? What are the main obstacles for being an inclusive leader, especially in the corporate world or in a startup?
So two big obstacles are office culture or company culture and politics. And we often risk in having a one-man fight. So in this sense, empathetic leadership, inclusive leadership needs to start from the top. It can't start midway, it can't start from the bottom. And another big obstacle is that also as a consequence of culture and politics, some people try too hard and some people basically bite their own back by trying too hard. So for instance, by trying too hard, I mean in their communication, they would overemphasize how much of a different team they are. They would try to basically overdo it, as in, hey, you are somebody from the you are somebody, for example, that has a different gender or has different, LGBTQ scene. So they would actually say, hey, can you advocate for our team? And can you take certain actions for our team? And often this basically backfires because these leaders tend to then use certain people who are recognized as diverse as little statues and as representatives for their team. And this is totally wrong, because we're talking about us. And with inclusion, we actually want to say, hey, we are a group. We are not queer, person of color, white, Chinese, etc. And in this direction, heavy support needs to be given from the upper management, and an example needs to be given from the upper management as well. So I'd say that these are the main obstacles, and yes, absolutely, it needs to be ingrained in the company, because inclusiveness starts from diversity. So diversity is basically being involved to the party, and inclusion is taking this person by the hand and saying, hey, let's dance all together. So if there's something that's missing in this process, then you're totally up for for the opposite of success, for failure, basically.
And what is the best way to achieve that if you try to convince C-level leaders, executive leaders, to completely change the whole world? To basically, if you've been told your whole life that the sky is blue, and then suddenly somebody tells you the sky is red. Is it coaching? Is it storytelling? Is it for them to see facts? What is, from your perspective, the most effective?
So this is linked to communication style. So if your leadership team likes data, give them the data. If your leadership team likes to hear stories, give them a story. If your leadership team is interested in the harmony in the company, give them a story that basically reflects the harmony, or that basically reflects how a diverse team can work together. If your leadership team is interested in output, well, tell them a story that basically tells them, hey, if we have the same people, we'll have the same product. Let's hire different people, let's include different people, and let's then have as an output a different product, and a product that's also more suitable to the people that we have, for example, in our company. Because if you're a startup and if you don't work, for example, with somebody from autism, you could have a huge gray area in your product that completely impedes people with autism from using your product, and so on. So it's all about communication style, and it's all about creating an empathy map of your leadership team and directing your leadership team according to what they want to hear in the communication style that they want.
And how do you then, I really like what you say in terms of treating diversity inclusion not as a nice fluffy thing where everybody holds hands and sings songs together. That's actually what a lot of people think that I do. Quite interesting. But actually it's something very strategic, hands-on, related to business strategy, related to business goals, and something that supports business goals. It's not, as a lot of people see, at least in Berlin, where I see a lot of companies work on learning and development, they see, well, we need to pitch to our boss to get learning and development budget. And if you don't pitch well enough, you're not going to get a budget. So while in my understanding, how I see learning and development, it's feeling like seeing the gaps, as you mentioned, the map, seeing the gaps in terms of leadership, in terms of communication, and seeing how can learning and development and inclusive leadership and improved communication style can actually support business in achieving its goals instead of other way around. So really, really nice in terms of having this skill gap analysis and then going more, how can you support business rather than, yeah, here is some money, good luck, we'll never be able to measure that.
Absolutely. And also sometimes, do some stakeholder management, engage your peers, engage other people in the organization and get some support. Don't have a one-man fight. Get some support and really make your case strong. And if you get to the point where you recognize that the company vision does not match your vision, then, in the worst of cases, there's plenty of companies out there, and there's plenty of companies that want people and leaders that are open to inclusion.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for saying that. And then the next question is more like for everyone, whoever wants to jump through that. And by the way, I see Louisa, you raised the hand. As mentioned at the very beginning of the event, this event is recorded, so we'll take the questions through Slido. Or if you want to ask a personal question, would like to speak, you could wait until the end and then we stop the recording and open up for discussion for more like a round table. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. And more of a question for everyone. So who decides, how do you even define inclusive leadership? How do you measure that? And what if I am as a subordinate and my boss, and I see that my boss is not a very inclusive leader? And how do I raise this topic? Who needs to decide? Is it needs to be the executive leadership who sees that? Is it needs to be the employees who raise the question? Or it needs to come from the inside? Like if you're not coaching ready, then it's no point for anyone to be coached, right? So what is the first step if you want your company to be more inclusive and have more inclusive leaders? You mentioned already, Diego, that it has to come from the top, but if the top is not even aware of the topic, how can it come from the bottom? It's just more like throwing it out there for everyone. If Ellie, maybe
I can start.
Yeah.
There's a saying like inclusion starts with I. No matter where I am, whether I'm at the top, in the middle, or at the bottom, I still have my own values. I still have my own strengths, and I can still think. And before walking out of the company, I would at least try to make it a case that other people understand that I do not feel included. That's all I can say. I mean, the rest of the people, my team has to deal with that. My boss has to deal with that. If he or she or it doesn't think that I'm worth to be included, then at least I tried, and then I can walk away. I wouldn't walk away just by assuming that I'm not included, which is obviously the reality, but maybe the boss or the others did not know. And did not know is something that I have to teach. I mean, I have to educate my surrounding if I want them to improve constructively. So I have to tell them what my needs are, and then they can choose. And that's why I think that, of course, in an ideal world, it comes from the top. It has to come from the top to be meaningful. So that not so much money is burned down the road. Definitely, it has to come from the top. But we all know it's not always there. So what can we do? Sometimes it needs to be a grassroots movement. Can be. Maybe people will walk away. But I know at least one company which has absolutely, I said why I left, and they have changed. 15 years ago, I left also, and they changed. So with the right people, with a lot of people going away, speaking up before they go, I think that the world and the corporate world can also change. And I would give that at least that chance.
Would you call yourself an inclusive leader, and why?
Me? I try to be an inclusive leader, but I know that I have also my gray spots, blind areas, and I try to surround myself with as many as different people so that I am constantly challenged. And there are many moments where I thought that I've been considered, but I haven't been, not enough. And that makes me humble, and that makes me feel, okay, I have to think about it. And when I realize that, I'm very open to make that change so that I can sort of resurrect that. I can amend that. And I think that I'm on a good way, but I'm not where I want to be.
It's very. I would like to add to what Ellie just said previously, if I may. Is it okay? Yes, I totally agree with what Ellie said, that inclusiveness needs top management support, because they have to decide for the company that it is not just a box ticking exercise, right? And still, I believe that no one should give up ownership on diversity, no matter at which management level I am, lower, middle, or top management level. And I think, to come back to your question at the beginning, where it starts with the fear of the unknown. I need to create a culture where no one should be fearful of the unknown. And I think that's most of the issues that we face, in particular in American, not so much, but more often in European, or let's say German boards, right? Where we have mostly male white person sitting there. And I read a recent study. They said, like, they don't necessarily have something against it to have, for example, a woman or someone from another culture, but it's unconscious bias, because that person is different, has a different social background, has a different way of thinking. And I think if we manage somehow to take those fears out of them, we can make a huge progress, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just what I wanted to add, which is also important to mention.
Absolutely. It's all about fears. It's all about being challenged, about, you know, your whole world, your whole, whatever you learn could be ruined, you know, and it's not very comfortable. It's not very comfortable to be outside of your comfort zone. Personally, I also agree with what Ellie said in terms of being challenged, being constantly challenged. My best person who challenges me the most, and sometimes, trust me, it's so annoying, it's my husband, who challenges me on everything, every time, no matter what I do. And obviously the first reaction is to snap. Like, why can't you just say it? I'm doing a great job, and that's it, like everybody else does. But then you think like, okay, maybe he's right. And then you think about it, and you slowly change your behavior, or change your perspective. And you don't want to admit that. Most of the time, I never admit to him that he's right. but and also in my team, in my Berlin team that I'm leading, you know, I like to get people on board that really will challenge me, because it's not going to be helpful if everybody agrees and say, oh yeah, they did a great job, oh that's brilliant, that's nice. Challenge me, tell me that I'm doing a shitty job, tell me that I'm wrong, and then I'm going to think about it. Like really create this, because sometimes, and very often, a bit of conflict, healthy conflict, is healthy. It's healthy for the organization. It's healthy to look at yourself in the mirror and see what can you improve in a sense. Yeah, really cool. We have a question from the audience, which is very good question, and gets me very excited. It's from Sasha. Hi Sasha, good to have you here. And the question is, how do I measure successful inclusive leadership? And what are the good examples of useful, actionable metrics? Bit of a tricky question, but it's definitely something that I'm sure the audience is going to benefit from. So, measurable, successful metrics of inclusive leadership. Any examples?
So I'll take over here. So basically, from my end, I would say, first of all, we need to create a safe environment, be it managing upwards, downwards, or sideways. And once we've created that safe environment, it's really about talking to the people around you, really about identifying in your team, asking your team on a regular basis, hey, inclusive leadership is one of my values. Do you feel that I'm being enough inclusive? Do you feel that I might have said or behaved in a certain way at some point that was hurtful to someone? And have this conversation with your peer group, with your managers, and really try to identify. So try to create a small feedback matrix, and try also to understand who those people who will give you negative feedback that you don't expect are. Because whilst these people are often the most annoying people, because they would get on your nerves, they are the people that give you the most valuable feedback, and that give you the opportunity to cover some big gray spots. So really keeping this conversation open. And yes, I would say that the measurement is informal, and you can of course find a formal way to transform this informal feedback. But definitely I would say that this is one of the best ways. And of course, we're talking a lot about profession, but I strongly believe that to be an inclusive leader, you need to be an inclusive person. So also ask feedback from the people around you, and also analyze the circle of people that surround you. Because if you are surrounded by a circle of friends that are very similar, then it would be beneficial to ask a few questions, and so on. So let's see what the others have to say as well.
Thank you, Diego.
Yes, it's so interesting, because I experienced once companies asked this question. They mostly related to their sales figures, right? And Diego, you did it the right way, relating it to the human beings, right? So for me, it would be to understand, like, do people feel comfortable in my culture? Do they stay for a longer time, you know? But most of the time companies want to know, how do all my diversity initiatives reflect my sales figures, reflect my ROI, right? And I think that's a pretty tough thing to do. And to be honest, I didn't find a solution for it right now, a very good solution. So I might also be interested to know what has been your experience, right, in terms of relating diversity initiatives directly to the business goals, objectives, which is monetary.
Thank you. I think in my understanding also, it's a little bit, looking, we could look at the quantity in terms of inclusive leadership. What kind of people do you employ? How diverse they are themselves? What are the engagement of employees who work with you? What is your relation with clients? It definitely, I agree, has to be both transparent. At the same time, not all things can be transparent in terms of giving feedback. I think some feedback can be anonymous, and sometimes the best feedback is anonymous, because people, there is also a question of the audience related to fear. And yes, people are afraid sometimes, especially if it's your boss. If it's your colleague, you can easily tell your colleague, oh, you're not very inclusive, I don't like when you do this, it offends me. I don't think it's inclusive behavior, or whatever you call it. You don't even need to call it inclusive behavior. But you can't tell it to your boss, of course. No. I mean, no matter how inclusive the company is, no matter how much they preach, there are some things you're not going to tell your boss. And it could be on a personal level, saying, oh, I didn't really mean that, don't take it so personal. But sometimes some things are better to be said from my perspective, because that could be the harshest feedback, but the one that actually makes you think. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. And in terms of your quantity, what kind of people work in a company, engagement level, productivity level, it's all related. It's all about how people work, how people there, and definitely the turnover rate in terms of people. Yeah, if people leave your company all the time, and people, especially as a boss, and then they keep rotating every 5 months, then it could be some question.
Yeah. I always tell my students that a leader earns his or her its followers, and I say followers, not inferiors. I say followers. After 2 or 3 promotion rounds or recognition rounds. If they're yearly, then it's 2 years. If they're half yearly, then it's obviously shorter. But for me, an inclusive leader is also not one that only capitalizes on everything that is diverse, but also recognizes that monetarily with a promotion. So I can understand being not promoted because other people are better. But if they are not better, but they look different, more like the boss, then it takes like 1 or 2 rounds to be a pattern. And if that pattern is not inclusive, then after that time, I think that most of the people would understand that it's just on the board, but not on the culture. And that is something that is not only a soft metric, because a softer metric would be, do I want to go to a party of the office? Will I belong there? Will I feel included? Will I be dancing there? Or will I be just being there, showing up, being polite, but then go because I don't feel that I should be there? Or do I not go and have an excuse? So those are the hard metrics that I could pick up. But also, do they feel, I mean, being included means that they want to follow you. So especially in consulting, I had some really good leaders that I would follow everywhere, no matter what the project would have been, as long as it would be like, okay, I can manage that, I would follow us. If they would be there, I would say, yes, I'm safe. And I think that makes an inclusive leader, so that they have followers and not just inferiors who have to work for them, and they will work, but they will give in 100%, but they're not giving 120%. As a psychologist, I'm not asking for 120%, but the will to do that is something that is only given wholeheartedly when you are being included.
Comes back everything what you're saying to safe space and trust, isn't it? So everything starts from that, and then to be honest, sometimes I think that I don't even like the word inclusive leader. I really hope it's going to disappear soon. What does it even mean, inclusive leader? It's supposed to be leader. It's supposed to be the definition of a leader, not just inclusive, non-inclusive. If you're not inclusive leader, you're not a leader. You're a manager.
Exactly.
And we also have a question from Louisa, who we kind of mentioned a little bit this question before, but we didn't really tackle on that well enough. How do you challenge exclusive leadership without fear? How do you challenge exclusive leadership without fear? While still keeping your job, supposedly.
I think Louisa wants to say something.
Louisa, if you're okay being recorded on the video, that's then I will unmute you. And you could speak up. Louisa, you are unmuted now.
It's on mute. Good afternoon. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, I've had many careers in my life. I'm 68 years old, and I'm in the process of changing my career again. You know, I lived in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Switzerland, Australia, Africa. So I've had a wide range of experience. When I lived in Germany, I'll be honest with you, I went to Germany in '78. I worked for the Consul General of Berlin. And I found during that period of time, before you had that mass explosion of migration, I found the German, like Eleanor said, a lot of inclusivity. You know, a German would say, "Can you do the job?" They'll hire you. They didn't look at your color. They did, as long as you could do something, they would take you like that. I returned to the UK when I was born in 1990, and the British questioned everything I did. You know, I worked for the Embassy of Grenada. I did everything. I'm an activist. I am a crazy woman, and I am one of 3 Black women living in Mid Wales, in Wales. And we have a big problem in the UK. I don't know about Germany today. I haven't been, I mean, I stopped coming to Germany when Dr. Rao died 4 years ago. He was living in Koblenz. But there's a big problem in the UK. And if you follow the campaigns in UK about exclusive, unconscious bias, you name it, everything is worse here in the UK than it is in Germany. It doesn't matter what your qualifications are. In Britain, they see your color first. They see your color first, you know, and it doesn't matter. They see your color first, and it's who you know. So, whereas in Germany, you know, I miss.
Now it's not exciting.
Do you want to comment on that? I think she lost her internet connection. She's not with us anymore.
Yes, I can agree to what you said. Like what I experienced in Germany is once the people know you, it's not an issue, right? But first of all, they see your appearance. And of course, they don't know Irène Kilubi is an engineer and she might be smart and she's a tough lady, right? but I have to experience myself. Every time I went to a job interview, I got the job, right? Because in fact, it's also about mindset. I went there and said, like, I don't care. You don't have to refuse me just because I'm Black and a woman. I have the competencies, and if I'm better than the rest, you have to take me. Damn, you know? That's the way I entered the job interview. You understand what I mean? So always try to be fearless. But to be honest, of course, if I enter a company, right, like a big German company, there are just a few women, and then also a Black woman, and then someone who's very, how do you say, auffällig, yes, someone you directly see. Of course, people will have some kind of stereotypes. They always thought that I'm a secretary, for example. No one thought that I actually work there in the research development department. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that we have to work on, right? Because they haven't been with me in the job interview. They haven't been working with me on projects, right? And so that's a major thing that one of my colleagues told me. He said, like, Irène, someone has to know you before he actually sees your competencies, right? But it's always the first barrier, because I cannot walk everywhere and convince everyone that I'm not what you're seeing. Exactly, yeah, you know? So I can to some certain extent agree to what Luisa said, right? Mm-hmm.
And I think this topic is also, it's discussed in one of our first events. When it comes to seeing color, when it comes to racism, Germany is very subtle. Germany doesn't seem to want to talk about it because of the painful past, because the term race is associated with the Nazi regime, and it's easier to pretend that race doesn't exist. That's why there is no census. And if race doesn't exist, there is no racism. But
exactly.
Yeah, but that's a different topic of the discussion than today. But every country has its own past mistakes, its own painful history. Britain has its own history. Germany has their own painful history. USSR, Russia, and US, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's not the topic for today, I guess. But if Diego and Ellie, you want to comment on anything, or we can move on.
Yeah, I would say we can move on.
Yeah, cool. Then I have some more questions coming. Yeah, let me challenge you a little bit, folks. Can you give me an example of a very good person, good manager, good leader, with good intentions? Maybe one of people being here today with us, but the person is not there yet of being an inclusive leader, of being a good leader. Let's just even leave out this word inclusive, because of some behaviors that this person might not be aware of yet. But the leader is very good intentions, good listener, very empathetic. But what kind of behaviors hold this person back from being there?
So I have one, and I won't mention the name. So this person is awesome, charismatic. His team loves him. His team has the highest promotion rates in the company, the highest retention rates in the company. So he is simply great. What, in my opinion, he does wrong, so he is dark-skinned, and what he does wrong is that he often makes self-jokes about dark-skinned people. And when I worked with this person, as much as I'm open to everything, whenever I heard a joke about, so he would say, hey, are you saying that because I'm Black? So nevertheless, I'm open to everything. My ears would spike up. And for me, that's being not inclusive, because if there was somebody more sensitive than me in the room, then things would go wrong. And being totally open, once he made these comments, I felt like some people in the room actually looked at me, and with that look as in, we're talking about two people here. So that made me feel, as much as I'm open, very uncomfortable. And if not for that detail, this person would be great. And I provided feedback to this person, but this is just how this person jokes. And I hope that at one point this changes, because he would be a great leader.
Do you think that could be maybe some sort of safety mechanism, like self-deprecating humor, in order to, you know, ease the situation? Or some people use it. There are some cultures that have very self-deprecating humor, and it's part of that. You never know. But thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very interesting example. Ellie or Irene, do you have any examples?
Yeah, I have one. But it's a story that at the end was really good. So it was an improvement. At that time, she was a manager, a high-profile manager already, and she always stated that she was not promoted on a pink ticket, meaning that she wasn't promoted just because she was a woman, but she was very happy to that being for her talents and everything, which was right. But the ways that she emphasized that, and also sometimes she said that she's against the quote. I always thought that, okay, that there are so many male counterparts who are not as good but still are promoted. So it's not bad to have a pink ticket, just because everyone who enters the board with a pink ticket can make a change. Of course, obviously, if it's just the Feigenblatt, if that person is just there and not doing anything, then it's the wrong person. But maybe she got into the position with a pink ticket or whatever, say then another ticket, but then can make a change. And I think that also should be acknowledged. Mm-hmm. And she also said that she didn't want to be associated that much with women's initiatives. Mm-hmm. But at the time that I met her, she then became the leadership. She became leading women, the leading person, not only woman, of the women's initiative. And she grew into that role, and I admire her totally. I'm a biggest fan. That's one of the bosses where I say I wouldn't have followed her, but then she went to another company, and I said, no. So I would have followed her into every project, but not leaving my company. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing.
I'm still interacting with her from time to time. So I still learn from her.
That's
I'm very proud that she
learn from someone
to learn that. Yeah, like I said, I was always privileged to have mentors, female mentors that made an impact on my career.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Irène?
Yeah. Maybe a more prominent example, because I wish that more leaders could be this way. I follow him on social media as well. It's Gunnar Kilian. He's sitting in the HR board of Volkswagen.
Oh yeah.
And first of all, I love it when men speak about diversity, because, like Diego, right? Because women are in the majority about talking about diversity. And I know from others as well that it's considered like, oh my God, you are putting yourself down into this soft skill topic. But he's very courageous, talks openly about it, he posts about it. And if we have more leaders like that, not only people who are affected, like women or people with cultural background, but also someone who's showing, first of all, empathy because he's a white man. And secondly, he speaks about it on a consistent basis. And I feel that's also one major step towards change, to have role models that you wouldn't necessarily expect speaking up about it, talk about it on social media, making themselves visible, right? Please don't be quiet, speak up. That would be one of my examples to share.
Could you please share later with me the name of the person so I could share it to the audience if
Yes, of
the
course.
ones who couldn't catch it. It's fun. You know, I have to agree on so many levels what you said about the fact that he's a white male, his voice counts more somehow when it comes to diversity inclusion because he's not directly impacted by that. Someone who on gender issues and who is a woman, her voice will be heard less. Or someone like me who will speak about race, my voice will be suddenly heard more. And it's unfair, but that's the reality. Or someone who has no invisible disability will be able to speak up and advocate. The voice will be a lot stronger. And then one of the speakers that I mentioned, that I had before mentioned, well, if I talk about race, if I talk about discrimination, I will be seen as a complaining person of color, right? But if you do that, Olla, you will be suddenly seen as an advocate. And that's what I see. It's, you know, it's important for us to be able to speak and advocate for people who cannot advocate for themselves. It's very, very important in my opinion. Thank you for sharing that. We have there are some questions that I wanted to ask as well. Are there any ways for you to first of all recommend some sort of, you already mentioned the leader, Irène, before. Are there any more leaders that you can think of as Ellie and Diego? The first person that comes to mind to me is I'm very proud of that. It's Prime Minister of New Zealand. If you have followed the news for the past few months, you'll definitely know that she's been through so much. And she's the first, she's one of the youngest prime ministers in the world that has ever been. She's very, very young, and she's one of the few who had a baby while holding the position. And she managed to deal with the terrorist attack in New Zealand. She managed to deal with the earthquake as well as a pandemic shutting down the whole country, all while being able to be leader. And what she had become famous for is the way she carried out a situation in New Zealand when there was a terrorist attack. It was probably the worst, I don't know, one of the worst of terrorist attack in New Zealand history. It was in a mosque in the South Island. And the worst part, it was live streamed on Facebook. But the way she presented herself and the way she presented herself in the country was one of the most empathetic, inclusive leadership that has ever been. And I admire her for the fact that she said, I've been always told off for that I will never get anywhere because I'm not aggressive enough and I'm not pushy enough. And I never wanted to listen to them. And I said, well, that's my different type of leadership. It's more empathetic leadership. But got you quite far. As a woman and as someone who is not willing to do the cutthroat others to get the high position. So to me personally, she is an inclusive leader. I will send more information about her for those who are interested.
Yeah, we all want a Jacinda.
Yes. I got goosebumps when you talked about what she managed all in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Pretty tough.
Wonderful. We have a couple of, we have about 20 minutes left. And I guess the main question that I also want somebody ask here, is there a difference between female and male inclusive leadership in your opinion? It doesn't depend on gender, or it doesn't depend on gender at all? Do leadership styles between males and females differ? And if there is inclusive leadership, doesn't matter at all?
Oh, well, here the answer is, so I wouldn't connect any difference regarding the gender, but I would definitely say that, as we mentioned previously, a woman advocating for female inclusiveness is seen much differently than a man advocating for male inclusiveness. And this applies to every kind of diversity and every kind of minority.
Thank you.
I would also say that, did you want to say something, Irène?
No, go on. I disagree.
Yeah, I would really say that there's no biological difference. Even if you say that the hormonal states differ for 5 or 7 days in a month, then it's still not enough to account for differences. So there are women and men who are more dominant and everything on that side. But the thing is that there are stereotypes in which behavior is then seen, perceived, and the interpretation is different in favoring men over women. And that makes it very hard because it's somewhat an expectation management. So if society expects a woman to be more dismissive, to be more submissive, and to be more harmony related and everything, then a woman is more pushy, then she's called pushy, and whether the other one is the male counterpart is more like he wins it. It's also winning streak. So it's not gender in the sense of the biological gender, but it's more like how it's perceived. And that is also something that you can't change. You can change the country, but then again, countries do change in their states as well. But it's more like you should look for the right company, and also you should look for the right husband or wife, because otherwise you'll be fighting in your inner circle and also in your outer circle in the company with your aspirations. If you want to become a leader as a woman, that's tough. If you want to not lead as a man, that's also tough, I think. So I've seen many male counterparts who didn't want to lead, but they were offered to lead, and I was like, why? I mean, they don't want to, but they have to, because now he has just become a father, so he should lead because he gets more money and then he needs to grow into that position. And I'm like, yeah, but he doesn't. He's the first to go. So it's also it's prejudices and it's peer pressure, and it goes differently for women and male, but it's not a biological source.
Well, I think that's a very, very interesting question. In fact, thinking of the poll that you did at the beginning, right? Many people said like empathy was one of the qualities they expect of an inclusive leader. So looking at studies that have been conducted in the past, they revealed that women are more empathetic than men. So we might be assuming at this point that it's easier for a woman to be an inclusive leader. So, right?
The barrier is leader.
Excuse me?
The barrier is the leader.
The barrier is the leader.
Once you are a leader, you're seen as an inclusive leader.
Yes, exactly. So that's in fact the way I understood this question, right? So that is there a different leadership style in terms of inclusion between men and women, and it was just like my thinking, right? Like it might be easier for a woman, in fact, to be inclusive in her leadership style due to empathy. But it's a question that I would like to open for everyone.
Yeah, I find it also quite interesting because this empathy will be expected more from female leaders and not really expected, but more of a celebrated if suddenly a male leader is empathetic in some ways. Yeah, but if you're not empathetic female leader, it's like, why not?
Exactly, right? It's expected of a woman to be empathetic at all.
And I mean, to this, I also have to add that women, as Ellie was saying, do have a certain amount of days per month where they go through some real suffering. Women suffer every time they walk by themselves alone on a street. You know, imagine as a man going on the public transport and having somebody trying to, you know, see what they can see or staring at you. Or imagine going to the park to read a book and having somebody approach you and trying to exchange their phone number, or, you know, trying to impress you somehow. So, I mean, women do see a lot. Women do build a lot of resilience. And since inclusiveness and empathy can be practiced through going out of your comfort zone and experiencing uncomfortable situations, in this respect, women might, I'm saying might because I don't have any data to show, but women might just as well be much greater inclusive people.
Because empathy also has to do with emotional intelligence. It's one building block of emotional intelligence. So yeah, scientists have revealed that women have more emotional intelligence than men. So we might be suggesting it as well, right? But I think Ellie might know it better because you're a psychologist.
Yeah, the thing is that it's personality, and personality is much wider ranged, and I don't think that while personality is very stable across the lifespan, it also needs triggers to shine or not to shine, and those triggers can come along the career. So I've seen women not being empathetic at all. So this beehive phenomenon where you would say, well, she has reached to the top, and why she is not lending a hand. And I've seen women who were quite the opposite, who were not even in a high profile leading position, but having all the attributes I would also say Jacinda Ardern has, right? So it's something that can change, and it can also change with having kids or not. So my students actually do say, those that I have accompanied with kids and without before that, say I've become a better lecturer, not motherly, but more inclusive, so to say. That is when I said I don't think that I'm already there. There were many occasions where I thought I've been already inclusive, but I wasn't. And motherhood has helped me to understand that.
Yeah, and I'm curious, all the parenthood in general. I recently saw a post of actually one of our speakers who was there a couple of weeks ago. He said the biggest reward now, and he posted a photo of himself and the kids. It's like the biggest reward now. It's not me, and the biggest achievement now. It's not me getting big clients and signing big contracts. And the toughest one thing for me now is getting a smile or approval from my kids, because it's the toughest thing ever. But it gives you a lot more empathy, and gives you a lot more, opens up your whole different world you didn't know existed.
Absolutely. But I just want to go back to this genotype thing, because the biology, psychology is quite complicated. So even if a woman gets a kid, then the hormonal status doesn't have to be like that she's happy. There's also a baby blues, and that baby blues can also prolong. And maybe that woman wants to get the children, but then she's not happy and she wants to work 100% or not. And that is also possible. So I wouldn't just, because she is a woman, then expect from her that she becomes motherly and empathetic and gets some, more experience to that under her belt. But I would say that people who want to do or who want to become inclusive can become inclusive, no matter what gender they are.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
There's no excuse on gender.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Then I have a little bit of a challenge question that is also quite interesting for me. When we discussed with Irène, we had our first conversation, and you mentioned intergenerational diversity. And the question for me here is now, for leaders who are, say, baby boomers, And they're used to very different types of leadership. They used to, let's generalize a little bit. They used to perhaps to more autocratic leadership. And someone who is more of millennial, you're like, oh, inclusive, yeah, it's so important. It's all about the impact. It's all about, it's very, very different in terms of how generations work. Do you think there is a difference between being an inclusive leader who's someone who's in their 60s or 50s, or whichever age, and someone who is just entering the workforce, or Generation Z or millennials?
Exactly. So as Ellie said, at first place, it's always something about personality, right? But you can always see a certain trait in a certain group of people, right? It's common nature. So yeah, totally right. There were many, many different expressions in the past. A visionary leader, transformational leader, and they have a different style of leading people, right? So they have this hierarchy thinking and this experience over talent, so I observe a lot of conflicts, right, between the generations, because and I would say I'm somehow in the middle between, okay, let's say Gen X and Gen Z, right, because I'm Gen Y, and I can somehow relate to both sides, because I've been working a lot in the past with the Gen X, and now I'm working even a bit more with the Gen Z generation. And in fact, you can really see that they expect something else from leaders, right? For them, it's common nature to have an inclusive leader, right? Because they see a lot from the world. They grow up with many different nationalities, more than the Gen X did or the baby boomer did, right? Firsthand. And then we have the baby boomer who say like, okay, they're young, they don't have any expertise. I expect them, right, to follow my instructions, to let me guide them, right? And so there are sometimes conflicts between that, and you have to bring both expectations together. Like, let them know that everyone is benefiting from the different expectation of the other one, like the creativity of the youngers, and maybe also the experience, and so to say, the ease of taking things from the other generation, right?
Very interesting.
And
yeah, I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours, but I have to stop now.
I love how you just not talk about one diversity, but like intersectionality. I love this kind of seeing the holistic rather than this.
It has to do with inclusiveness, like considering different age groups. It's so underestimated.
Absolutely. Diego,
Irene,
you wanted to say something?
Yes, what I want to say is that overall, also following up what Irene said, the leader who will flourish is the leader who has the best capacity in adapting. And I mean, what I can say from personal experience is that back when I was a teenager, arguments were face-to-face. And when you were face-to-face with 3 people arguing with you, you had to say the right words. Otherwise, you would get a slap in the face and you wouldn't know what would happen afterwards. Whereas in this generation, arguments are more online. So this has as an output different skills. So what I see from my experience now is that the leaders that are from newer generations are more adapt to an online environment of leadership, whereas my generation is more adapt to a face-to-face environment. So there are definitely lots of differences. And yeah, as I mentioned before, it's all about adapting, and it's all about trying to be a step ahead of what's going on in the outside world.
And it's also about what you said previously, Diego, about communication. It's a totally different style and way of communicating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it. Unfortunately, we have only 5 minutes left. And yeah, let's just be boom to the point. So we have a question from Dini, the beautiful Dini, who was part of the event before as a speaker. Thank you for being here with us. And she has a question. which is about biases. How would you approach the leadership team to say, I don't have a bias, or any other defensive statement when being challenged to be more inclusive? Ellie or anyone?
Well, if they ask that, then they already have it. That's a no-brainer. I mean, it's actually it's a realistic question, because I have that. Yeah. I sent my leadership once an email like, oh, you don't even have a female expert, because it's all it's like all male panel, not panel, but it's like they had I don't want to give away so much, but they had only male experts. And I said, well, isn't it funny that you don't have any females? And they said, why? I don't understand the question. Can you iterate? And I was like, yeah, that's the point. You don't even understand it. So I said, yeah, because it's funny that in 2020 you have a male expert team, and I know for 3 of them, they're not as good as a couple of women. So how is it possible that you don't see these women who are much better, but you just see those who are next to you? And then I say, if they ask the question, then I answer that. I'm not really, I don't hide.
And I also think that this defensive behavior doesn't help us at all, right? The main thing is to be self-reflective. Just first of all, just accept it. If someone tells you like, your team is not diverse, right? Just say, I would say like, okay, you're right? And then try to figure out why is it this way and how can I change it, right? Because people always start to be self-protective. Oh, I don't have anything against women. In the past, I used to work with several women. I had a woman as a boss. It's not the point. It's about what is the status quo, and do you want to change it? Well, so be reflective and let's work on solutions.
Yeah, instead of saying, oh, but I have 2 daughters. Oh, I have a black friend. Yes. Oh, I know my neighbor is homosexual. So excuses, you know?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, as the last question, I guess to all of you, I would say, and it's not an easy one. I don't think either of us have any specific answers for that. But how do I, as a person from the audience, evaluate my inclusivity as a leader? Where is this magic tool, or what can I possibly do to actually look inside of myself and see? I mean, there is no scale per se, not that I know of. Maybe you know it, to show that you're 8 out of 10 to be an inclusive leader. Yeah. But how do I look into myself? Definitely I can listen to others and listen to feedback, but what can I use to actually see right now, right here, what are my danger zones, so to say, in the areas I need to work on to be more inclusive?
Okay, so first of all, my answer is more practical. So buy a heart rate monitor. So it could be something that you put on your pulse, and go out there and put yourself in a challenging situation with a challenging person. So for example, when you wait for your public transport, instead of taking out your phone and scrolling up and down and swiping right and left, go to that homeless person, ask that homeless person their story, ask that homeless person, get to know that homeless person, and spare a few euros for that homeless person, spend a few minutes with that person. And when you go back to your normal activities, look at how your heart rate, look at what your heart rate monitor registered. If you see that there are spikes, then there's some work that you need to do. Likewise, approach a person fully tattooed on the street. Approach a person that is alone listening to some music on the street and dancing like a mad person. Go to that person talking by themselves. when traveling, approach challenging situations and look at what your heart rate monitor says. If there are spikes, then you need to work on that. If there are no spikes, well, good for you.
That's an amazing advice. I already have
you're dead.
monitor. I'm unlucky. So definitely, that's a brilliant advice. And then we would have thought of that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, there's actually a questionnaire from 2014 or 17. I'm quite old, obviously, and it covers the whole range of diversity and inclusion. So it's got questions on color, on age, and everything. Many of these aspects we haven't also covered, and you can then create, or you can then calculate your privilege score. So how privileged you are. And I've learned about that tool only half a year ago. And if I had known that years ago when I was new, I would have made it mandatory to all my students. I will now. But I think that it's important to have a common basis, because that is absolutely a wonderful approach, individualized, great approach. But I think that in a room with 20, 70 people, having them doing the questionnaire, I'll be really looking forward to discuss that. And I will reserve the hours for that, so that we can discuss their scores and how it made them feel, whether they feel humble or whether they feel, yes, that's what I earned. That's what my parents earned. They are, I don't know, rich. They are privileged because of that, not because of the color, but they're privileged because of the academic things they have achieved. And I think that opening the eyes of others via a questionnaire is then a valid point. Going out in the real world is also I haven't heard about this approach. I will definitely try it up. I have one, so I can do this. But I think something that is scalable in the digital world, scalable, I'll give you the link for that.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. We'll add it to the email. Irène, is there anything you want to add?
I think they already gave super duper examples, right? But maybe something that everyone can easily do, right? I already mentioned it, like being self-reflective, thinking of what kind of prejudices do I have myself. And it was also very surprising for me when I read a comment on one of my articles from my network, and she openly admitted that she is scared if she's standing somewhere and there are at least 2 Black men near her. But I think that's a good thing, to be open about it, right? To accept that there is some kind of prejudice that I have. But the main thing is to work on it, and most importantly, not to spread around such kind of prejudices, right? And not to give your fears over to your children, for example. That's a very good thing. And last but not least, if you notice that someone else is behaving in a discriminating way, that you speak up, right? And not just look away and pretend as if there was nothing. Absolutely. Those are the 3 things I would like to give people out there. Easy things that everyone can do without going outside. Even during the lockdown, you can practice it.
Brilliant. I love this. I love this advice. Thank you so much. It was a brilliant event. Now, dear audience, you have a chat enabled. If you have any questions, last minute questions, feel free to give a shout out. Thank you so much. Amazing audience and amazing presenters. It was so brilliant. I've learned personally so much